There's a lovely sentence from that Faith in Mind poem. Cease activity and return to stillness, and that stillness will be even more active. So there's two stages. One is returning to stillness. So the part of ourselves that needs to become still is the mind. So just bringing the mind back to the Dantian. So by having the legs a little bit bent, it just means that you're connecting with the gravitational field much better. So you can feel the pull of gravity as like a flow of energy through the body. And then just by switching the mind, you can feel the ground flowing up through you, which must be happening. Otherwise, you'd be moving downwards. This is equilibrium. So central equilibrium is the balance between what's flowing down and what's flowing up. So we would normally lock that out, become tense, frozen, solid, to give us a sense of being more stable than we really need to be. So we need to bring the mind to the Dantian, but at the same time, relax the body. And then we can feel the down and the up. And we can feel the body is always at least two things. It's in two halves. There's a left side and a right side. So most obviously, the movement that wants to come in is between those two sides. So what is wanting to happen all the time when we're standing still, if you relax out of the stiff tension that's trying to hold an artificial stillness, is that the two sides are wanting to play. So turning is wanting to happen. It's natural to turn. This is what we want to feel. Let's just start turning. Rather than it being something that I'm imposing upon my body, which is what we would normally do, feel it as an action of just one of the legs. So let's say I'm going to use this leg. We've been emptying by moving into this leg and just allowing this leg to just sort of flush out and empty. Instead of the action moving me into this leg, I want the action just to turn me. So as I empty this leg, this hip gets pushed around. So what you need to do to stop yourself from moving in that direction is either just think of the sacrum as being the middle of the circle, or push with this leg a little bit. And then just let yourself spring back to the front. And then here, just feel this leg emptying. So it empties, and I will turn to the side. I'm turning because one of my legs is emptying. So I want to feel the turning as something that happens because my left and my right side are interacting in a certain way, rather than it simply being an action that's been imposed upon this body by a controlling mind. So here, this is just emptying, and it pushes me round. I'm turning by actively emptying one of my legs, the leg that I'm turning away from. Try and keep it relaxed across the lower back. So this is one of the advantages to working with turning from the legs rather than from the waist, is that it enables this area to remain relaxed. Because what you'll find is when you do the form and you finish a posture, there's always this feeling that you can relax into where you've come. So ideally, we'd like to have been relaxed as we come into it. So I need to keep the two sides of my body cooperating but separate. Both sides really have to listen to each other. Okay, now let's try the same thing, turning from the leg, but now only using the one leg. As before, just let the leg straighten a little bit and empty out. And then use the leg to bend and pull yourself round. So this is pulling the ground and filling up from the ground as I come round. And then this is pushing the ground and emptying down the leg as I turn away from it. I'm relaxing the leg into emptiness. And then here, even though I'm pulling, I'm still relaxing into fullness, because if I get tense here, then the ground won't come up. I want to feel like it's the ground that's holding me up. Try and remain relaxed across the sacrum, so the sacroiliacs. That's an indication that the two sides are separated, independent a little bit, but obviously cooperating to produce this image of smooth, even, easy movement. So as I leave the foot, my toes become active because I've left the heel. The heel has become empty. The toes have activity. So the toes pull me round. Then as my weight comes into it, as the ground starts moving upwards, I come into the heel. And then here's my heel that pushes. And then let's try a little bit with this leg. So emptying the leg and then filling the leg. So here, obviously, it's had to sort of hold on to hold me up. And now here, it just lets go of that. And it comes out as a push. So if you read that article, that interview with Nitsan, you'd see that he's always at pains to stress that Tai Chi is all about connection. For there to be connection, there needs to be more than one thing. So there needs to be two things that can then connect. So the connection itself overrides the importance of either individual. So even when we're on our own, we're always at least two things. So here, a left and a right, but also an upper body and a lower body. Also an internal aspect and an external aspect. And then the breathing, I have the in-breath, I have the out-breath. So it's how these things interact and connect that's important. So we want that connection to be just a function of the two individuals, rather than it being some authority that's forcing a togetherness. So when I tell people here about the work that Nitsan is doing with the Bedouins, their response inevitably is, oh, it's a waste of time. It's not going to make any difference, which is incredibly cynical. But also, he's doing it for his soul. He knows it's not making very much difference, but it's making an enormous difference to him. So the connection that he has, the nurtured connection that he has with a culture that is completely different from his own, is developing his soul. And this is what I always feel about the people here. They're soulless, because they see the other as the enemy. Okay, now let's just get both together now. So one is emptying and one is filling. And I just want to feel this movement as being these two sides interacting. Because it's delicate and it's a little bit precarious, it'll wobble a little bit. So don't worry about that. That's a good sign. If you're too stable, it's just a sign that your mind is frozen and locked and become stiff and hard and ugly. So it's so important to have something in your life that is developing your soul. So it's what the Tibetans call compassion. You're suffering with the other. You're suffering for the other. You're joining them in their suffering and you're sharing it. Feel these two movements as flows. So the earth is rushing up into me as I rush out of the other leg. So it's spirit that keeps these two sides separate but cooperating. And spirit, remember, will only manifest when the mind stops. So we're always looking for situations that force the mind to stop. And just notice, as soon as you think you know what you're doing, you're thinking, and the spirit will be replaced by habit. We're sort of willfully remaining in the dark. So negative capability. The ability to really flourish when you're in the dark. Bring it to riding horse. feel the bottom of your sacrum. That just needs to press forwards a little bit so that my sacrum is angling down my legs. And my legs are bending in order to pull my sacrum down into them. Cease activity, return to stillness. So my body is relatively inactive. So my mind has to become so. And then we can observe the energy. So the energy is basically wanting to do what we've just been doing. It's wanting the two sides to play. So this is the operative word, really. A sense of play. A sense of humor. So a sense of humor, it's a bit like just the ability to just relax and just see the bigger picture and then just laugh at it, laugh at all the anxiety and the angst that's going on in the smaller picture. That's right brain. So the non-ego. The ego is from the left brain here. So that's all ego. This is just your sort of intuitive big side, the bigger picture, the part that sees the long term, the part that would not tolerate most of your behavior if it had a say. So at one point, this used to control us. And then we found a way of working on this to make it dominate. So this is shouting all the time. And this has been reduced to the barest whisper. So this would be like your conscience, the voice of God, which is inside all of us. We just choose not to listen to it. Keep it really sort of twisty-turny. So rather than it just being this sort of piston machine, it's, ooh. It's got soul. Bleeding. Here, let the sacrum really go down into the legs. Feel your two arms like two tentacles, like the tentacles of the octopus that are just reaching out and then pulling things in. And then just feel the legs the same. This is the side that's emptying as I turn away from it. In the arm, I would feel that as a tentacle reaching out. But I want to feel it here as well. So the two limbs on that side are like two tentacles that then grab the world to pull itself round. Feel the legs like tentacles. So something definitely flows out of the sacrum and across into the hip and down the leg. And then once you get it, just feel the two minds. So one mind is just totally with the exercise and engrossed and unaware of what's going on around it because it's so inside the machine. But then there's another mind that reaches out and is just quietly observing. It's like the mother and the child. The child is playing to its heart's content, and the mother is watching over it. So we have these two aspects. So we have the left brain, which we want to stop being an ego and start being something that's just attending to this situation and the short term and the now. So that's the part that's here and now. The power of now. That's your left brain without the ego. It's just really present and just spirited and attending to the situation. But then you've got this right brain, which is just filling the room and just looking in. To be able to switch between these at will. Bring it back. The mind in Dantian. So that's the left brain. So the ego mind. The way we retrain the left brain to be less of an ego and more of a useful instrument for dealing with dangerous situations is with discipline, because the ego hates discipline. We all know that. We all know how difficult it is to discipline ourselves. That's because the ego doesn't like it or find any excuse not to practice. You need to have enough of a developed right brain to be able to put yourself through the discipline of practice. If this isn't well developed, then there won't be any voice. There's no voice of your conscience telling you, come on, get on with it. You need to practice. Turn the fucking computer off and get on your feet and do something. If you don't have that, then basically you're doomed. You're not one of the chosen. So I bring my mind to here. And to do that, I need to just become still. Need to become still with my body as well. But then once I have that mind anchored here, then I can just let it open up. And then the movement that comes in is of a very different order, because it's not me, it's not my ego moving my body. It's just these waves and currents of energy that's just inside. That's the mind that we're wanting to get to. The mind that is almost synonymous with energy. And now let's try just the circles, because I think there's no better exercise really for young style Tai Chi than this. Feel how the weight of the hand, of the arm, will always tend to make this happen. So we're just always struggling to have the tentacles that stem from the sacrum melting down the legs all the time. So you have a tentacle that comes out of each side of your sacrum, and that is like a leg. Then you also have a tentacle that comes out the bottom of the sacrum from the tailbone, and that's like a tail. So they're very different. So here, this is being allowed to reach down as that side empties down into it. It's just feeling that wave of emptying as a tentacle, as something that has some sort of substance, albeit probably only energetic. And then just bring the mind into the tail a little bit. So the tail is your sense of mischief. So if you can reduce the person, the individual, then you could reduce them to their sense of humor and their sense of mischief. So their sense of humor is like just their ability to just really see the big picture and realize that that big picture is always changing. So it's the thing of impermanence in Buddhism. So it's all you can rightfully do is laugh at it. And then your sense of mischief is just you. It's just you in your absolute essence. There's something in you that just has to do something. It has to act. I love that story that John used to tell about his mother. So his mother was like a real force of nature. Didn't really get on with anyone. And she was always getting into fights and into arguments and always winning because she had such good dominating energy. John tried to teach her something about yielding, when he got into Tai Chi, and just saying, Mum, next time you're in a confrontation, you just got to yield. Just put the other person first, let them win. Apparently a week later, she came up to me and says, I got into an argument, she says, and I yielded and I yielded and I yielded, but then I just had to attack. So the yielding is like the sense of humor. You see the other person's side, and so it's very difficult to take yourself seriously. But then the attack is like the sense of mischief that's going to thump them in the nose anyway, just for the hell of it. So we need both sides, the yin and the yang. Back to riding horse again. There's a sense that the triangle of the sacrum is like an axe blade that's cleaving this hip structure and just going down. Lifting the legs, because this is important. Going into the outside edge. Feeling the circulation within the posture. So I'm sinking into my outside edge. So there's a sense that I'm melting into the ground in this direction. Then the knee coming up actually brings the circuit up this side and down this side. the bottom of my sacrum and my tail just sucking under a little bit. Giving it a helping hand. Stay in the outside edge. As soon as you touch the leg, it will tend to bring a bit too much into it and pull you over. So this arm should really be out here. Feel the two separate minds. So the mind that's on the side here and the mind that's here. So this is Taoism, really. Taoism is just always being in two minds, which is very not our culture. Because our culture, you have to be for one and against the other. So here we just want to balance the two. And the more we can separate them and feel them being opposites of each other, the more energy that's generated by their play. But also, of course, the more dangerous it becomes. It's the sense of a middle way that has been produced by balancing two real extremes. So I'm sinking down into my outside edge, but then that allows the ground to come up the inside, if you like. So as I sink into the leg, the ground is actually coming up into me. This is the feeling. So I'm slipping down here, something comes up here, and then that can express as like a whip of energy in the other side of the body. All the time I have to keep the separation of the two sides. I don't want them to freeze together. And I'll feel that as just a looseness, like the smile in the sacrum. I don't want my sacrum to frown with anxiety. It's expanding with a big smile. And now let's just try figure of eighting with the leg. I'm yielding the foot off the ground, and then it can whip out, and then it comes back in, and then out. Like the tentacle that goes out, picks something up, and then just places it down at your feet. Keep the two sides separate. Separating the two sides will always tend to compromise your appearance of balance. You'll become wobbly, but you'll also become a lot more energetic. So cease activity, return to stillness. So that's what we've been doing. But now you can feel the activity, feel how that's even more active once you become quiet and still inside, and therefore capable of spirit, and therefore energized. You're just full of movement. Feel if you try to have any control of that, or even if you try to look at it in a way that understands it, you'd ruin it. You'd crush it. So you've just got to allow it. You've just got to be in the middle of this maelstrom that's just feel the two minds. So you've got one mind that's just here, disciplined and obedient. And then you've got another mind, which is really just, that's like the circumference of your being. This is the center of your being. So the part we normally have with our circumference is the ego, because it's always wanting to reach out, and it's fundamentally greedy, the ego. It's always wanting more, and it's always wanting what other people have. So this is the problem, the human race, really. So we just bring that under some control, and we let our right brain, our big mind, our conscience push out into the world. Then you can go into the world softly and listeningly, respectfully, carefully. I've got a student and she's got a strong ego. So if ever I say anything, she has to counter it with her opinion. Ego will always put up a counter of me. Oh, I believe this. Just for the sake of the aggravation, even if they don't believe it, they could completely agree with you. Yes, but it's always conditional. Because I used to go to Ireland a lot. And in Ireland, it's like the opposite. If someone was to say something and you was to say, no, I don't agree, that would be considered really rude. So you never say no, you always say yes and. Oh, yes, that's amazing. And then you give your little bit. And then it's like a snowball that just is running down the hill, getting bigger and bigger. So that's energy, that's spirit. My sacrum is just trying to get down despite the pain in my legs. So I've got my legs saying, no, not anymore. But my sacrum is just hungry for that earth. It knows that that's where it belongs. So it's just trying to just get through my body. A bit like the death wish, yeah? It's a bit like meditating and just facing this oncoming death and welcoming it, smiling at it, beckoning it. The difficulty here is just getting the legs to be relatively straight without the sacrum popping out of the legs. And my hips are holding on to my sacrum and pulling it down. There's a sense that I'm bending the legs and straightening them. It's the back of the leg that's bending the leg, and my front of my leg is trying to straighten. Activate the hamstrings a little bit. And that's difficulty. That's a different mind. That's that really sort of tight, vigilant mind that's just ready for death, ready for the fight. Feel the dantian, tip of the tongue on the roof of the mouth, and just feel the perineum underneath. So my perineum is trying to suck up into my dantian. And this point on the top of my head, so this feeling of wanting to cower under the low ceiling, is pulling down into the midbrain point where my tongue is pointing. My two sides are so loose, separated, that I need this. I need this, and I need this, and I need the perineum just to keep me together. And then just feel that the sense of humor, a part of you that's just wanting to turn all the time.